Or rather, good afternoon and hello to everybody, and welcome to this, a very monumental stream because you're almost so close to the end of English Lit. Um, Hello to everybody. Hello to Caitlin, Toby, Kieran, Jonathan, Nina, and Sarah. How are we all doing? It's great to have you all here today. Um, it's 5:30 by my clock, and I'm sure you are as keen as I am to get started. So welcome. Please let me know where you are, where in the country you are, um, you know, the city you're in, the town that you most closely associate with. Drop that into the chat for me, just so I have an idea of where everyone's coming from. I'm here just outside of lovely Bath, which some of you may know. Welcome to Eleanor, welcome to AG, and we are here to do Literature Paper 2, focusing, of course, on the exam board, AQA. Shout out to York, what a place. Um, Covering Blood Brothers, Love and Relationship Poets and Unseen. Welcome from, hello to Birmingham. How is it up there, up north? Liverpool. Well, you must be excited over there in Liverpool, either way. West Berkshire, wow. Worcester, Leicestershire, Lincolnshire, great. Sarah's there, a Londoner. I was until very recently one of those too, but now I'm out here. Welcome, Kieran. Just a few little bits. I don't want to keep us too long on the housekeeping, but of course, as I'm sure you know, your friends need help too. Please do invite them along. Just copy the link in the address bar and share that to them if they are doing Blood Brothers, Love and Relationships, or Unseen Poetry, which everybody's doing. Of course, Inspector Calls and the others. Lots of questions coming in about what I do if I do a couple of different texts. I will explain all of that to you in just a moment. Please, before we begin today, subscriber only mode is on, so please do subscribe if you want to ask me questions. Smash that like button. Go on, smash it. Why not? Celebrate it. You're almost at the end of English literature. You've just got this, and then tomorrow's exam, and then, unless of course you're taking it for A level, you can say goodbye to these fantastic books. And please do turn on those notifications. But the most important thing here is obviously subscriber mode is on. So please do subscribe. If you'd like to ask me any questions about literature paper 2, obviously we have our other cram courses. I'm hiding behind my own head there. We've got maths, we've got biology, we've got chemistry, we've got physics. So please do look out for those. All of the info is there right in the description of this video. Okay. Lots of questions about structure today. I just want to tell us how we're going to look and how it's going to go. Yep, get Alex to 10K. That's where we need to be. Not too far away. Always appreciated. Thank you, Mamoret Art. We're starting for an hour on Blood Brothers. If you're doing Inspector Calls, the link to Louis' stream is in my description. Head over there. He's going to be sending people this way as well if he's got any Blood Brothers students in there. At 6:30, we'll have a 5-minute period for a changeover / a break. And then in Louis' stream, he'll be doing Power and Conflict, and I will be doing Love and Relationships. So Amina, I can see, for example, you've asked, what if I do Blood Brothers and Power Conflict? Stay with me till 6:30, then head over to Louis' stream for Power and Conflict. We're then going to tell students just to stay in the stream that they're in after the poetry, because both Louis and I will be doing the same thing, but it's just easier. It saves time if you just stay where you are. Welcome, Scrooge. Hello there. How are you getting on? How was Christmas Carol last week? And how was everybody's? It was chemistry today. How did everybody find that? I'm sure you're well into exam season now. You know, you've had a week, you've had a day. You must be feeling pretty confident. Believe you me, it's actually a very exciting time of life. As annoying in ways that it might be, it's also really valuable. I'm sure you've been enjoying the questions. What we're going to be doing is sort of a content, a little bit of context recap for the text, particularly for Blood Brothers. We'll look at 10 key quotes, no extract on this, but we'll be deep diving into the texts themselves and then doing a little bit of essay planning and thesis modeling. Sort of similar, I guess, for the poetry, where you're going to be given a text on that. As I said, the main things just to emphasize, we're focusing on AQA. Okay, that's the exam board that we prioritize here at my EdSpace because it is the one that most students are on. I've seen some questions about other texts. There's only me and Louis, so we can only offer two texts, so Inspector Calls, Blood Brothers, Power and Conflict, Love and Relationships. The unseen is more general. Everybody's going to do that, and I will talk to you about that a little bit later. Good to hear that the chem paper went well. I think you have a couple more. I'm sure they will go well too. AQA is the exam board, but obviously if you're doing a different exam board and you're doing Blood Brothers, for example, obviously the story is the same. The general approaches to the question roughly the same. So I think it will still be valuable. Cool. Okay. We're going to begin just with a quick recap of the plot, and I'm going to use that just as a jumping off point to talk about some of the more key aspects of, I'm just going to make myself a little bit smaller here so that I can have a bit more space to write. Some of the key aspects of the play, things that we need to know, particularly around genre, obviously it being a musical. So why don't we just see and test the revision that we've done so far, and you can tell me then, Mrs. Who is a working class mother. Nice one, James, straight in there, good to see you, thank you so much. So Mrs. Johnston is a working class mother. I'm going to highlight a few things that I'm going to come back to at the end of this recap, just to make sure that we're clear. Because what I'm going to basically do here at the beginning is sort of link plot to context a little bit, because obviously AO1, it's all about your ideas and your knowledge of the text. AO3 is all about context and how those things link together. So, Mrs. Johnson is a working class mother with too many children to support. When she becomes pregnant with something, James, straight in there again, mate, well done. With twins, she agrees to give one of the babies to Mrs. Sarah, well done, Lyons, a wealthy woman who cannot have children of her own. The boys, Mickey and, there should be a little night there, Edward, grow up in very different households. One poor, one rich, but they meet by chance to become best friends, calling themselves brothers. Mrs. Lyons grows increasingly what? What does she grow increasingly as the kind of opening parts of the play progress? In terms of her feelings, in terms of her emotions, how is Mrs. Lyons feeling towards the start there? As she sees Mickey and Edward kind of become friends. Any thoughts? I would say probably, yeah, anxious is a great word there. Definitely, she's concerned. She doesn't want Edward to realize, does she? Possessive is another great word there, Sarah. Absolutely, for sure. Paranoid, worried, brilliant. Eventually, both families move to the where? Where do they move? Just outside of Liverpool. Kind of part of that big migration. I would say the word that we're looking for is suburbs. And again, that's a word I'm going to come back to. Where the boys meet again. Mickey and Edward grow up still unaware that they are twins. Skelmersdale, yeah, well done. Skelmersdale there for suburbs. Countryside, yeah, I would accept that as well. It's certainly a nicer part than the inner city they were living in originally. Mickey struggles with unemployment and poverty while Edward enjoys a comfortable life and goes to... This could also be brothers. Nice one, people. Good. And if I could emphasize one thing, and I would always say this to my students, you know more than you think you do. As you will have found last week with Macbeth or Romeo and Juliet, whatever it might be, you get in there and really all of this stuff is there. QQ, good to see your name. Always a familiar sight. He goes to university. Well done. Both fall in love with who's our romantic, talk of Oxbridge. That's a great quote there, Esme. Linda. But she ends up marrying Mickey after becoming what happens to her. Similar, I guess, in many ways to what happens to Mrs. Johnston. She becomes, of course, pregnant. Nice one, Sarah. Nice one, Scrooge. Nice one, Ashas. Nice one, Maria. So she falls pregnant, pressured by money. Mickey ends up involved in a crime with his brother, the catalyst of the conflict. That's a great little comment there, buddy. Love that. Good. She becomes involved in a crime with his brother. What's his brother's name? Nice one, Sarah. Sammy. And ends up in prison. He becomes depressed, and he depends on, as you will know, antidepressants. Kind of prophetic in a way, this sort of medicalization of depression, very much anticipating what was to come later. Linda turns to Edward for help, which makes Mickey loving it. Like No Name Jones. Esme, well done. Nice one, AG. Antidepressants, well done. It doesn't make Mickey like Marilyn Monroe, but it does make Mickey jealous. At the town hall, Mickey confronts Edward with this tragic item here, the gun. Mrs. Johnston reveals that they are... Ooh, AG, that's a nice little word there as well. Livid, absolutely. But him being so livid, it comes from his jealousy, doesn't it? Good stuff. Really great to see. I can see the revision's been going exceptionally well. And you guys are in a very privileged position in terms of studying Blood Brothers, and I'll explain why in a moment. What does Mrs. Johnston reveal? Nice one, Ashas, that they're twins. And in the tragic ending, Mickey kills Edward and then is killed by police. Now, this is probably one that's a little bit up for debate, but the narrator asks if we should blame who, or who. Should blame such a Liverpool word, livid. Yeah, it is. And obviously the influence of Liverpool is massive. Kills, shot, class, superstition, or society. Yeah, class. Maybe society or superstition itself. Okay, great. Now, because I'm here to teach you, and just a final recap of some things that you may well need tomorrow. Okay, so here's a few very important and final bits of reminder for Blood Brothers. Okay, so the first comes down to genre. Do we know what genre Blood Brothers is? It's very similar to, well, it is the same genre really as, I guess, the Shakespeare's. It's a tragedy. Okay, it's a tragedy. Oh, look at that. That is not how you spell tragedy. Now, if you're aiming 7+, okay, which I'm sure many of you are, thinking about the way that the play corresponds to the elements of tragedy is important. So, it's a tragedy. It has elements of comedy. You know, this play is meant to be funny, and the comedy links definitely with the fact that it's a musical. Musicals themselves are quite modern types of drama. Okay, the way that we know the musical with the songs and the kind of big productions on the West End. But at the very core of the play, it's a tragedy. And it's a tragedy because it has the following things. Now, the first thing that it has that's very, very Shakespearean in a way is that it has a kind of prologue, or at least at the start, the narrator reveals the ending. Okay, so we know, and in fact they fade away, that's the stage direction, fade away, that Mickey and Edward will die. And that creates a sense of inevitability. Okay, so if you're talking about the way that the play is structured, you're going to want to talk about the fact that right at the start of the play, we know what happens. Okay, and what that creates is a sense of inevitability. And for the audience, it creates a sense of anticipation. Okay, because we're going to be watching, wondering, okay, at what point are we going to see these characters die? Right, that's the first thing. Obviously, we have in Mickey and Edward two tragic heroes. Am I related to Andy Murray? No, I'm not. I'm not. Nor am I. Nor am I related to Luke Littler, which as I've had before as well. Can I compare this to poetry anthology or no? Exu, there's no need to do comparison on this question. Just focus it on the text itself. Tragic heroes, Mickey and Edward. And remember, what makes them a tragic hero is the fact that they will experience a downfall. And typically the downfall that tragic heroes experience is a death. Okay, they will die. This is what links to that idea, I guess, similar to inevitability, which is fate. Okay, the role of fate, etc., etc. Now, tragic heroes have something called a hamartia, which is a fatal flaw. Well done, James. I can see you can see where I'm going with this. What's Mickey's and what's Edward's? Definitely Mickey's would be his pride, okay, because he's unwilling to, what's the word, accept help, definitely. Successful Valiant, we're going to be moving on to quotes just after this. Let's just make sure we've got a nice overview of the text first. Edward's is probably his naivety, okay, the fact that he doesn't really understand the trials and tribulations of someone like Mickey, for example. He's protected. He's sort of separate, isn't he, really, from his privileged position. Now, there are some other slightly less important for this play, but still I'll mention them. Anagnorisis, which is the moment of realization. Okay, and that's when the tragic heroes realize. Nice one, Scrooge. Nice one, James. Daniel, poetry's at 6:30. The moment of realization is when they discover that they're twins. Okay. M2 King, we will be doing that, yes. And the next one is, excuse me, peripeteia, which is the turning point of the play. Any ideas when that might be? When do things start to go badly, as I guess is the best way of describing it? When do we turn from things going well to going badly? I would argue maybe it's when, it's quite early, Mrs. Johnson gives gives Edward away. Okay, so again, if you're aiming 7 plus, James, the robbery is also a good example. Again, peripeteia tends to be something that audiences bring, in the sense that, you know, we all have slightly differing opinions. After Mickey loses his job is another example. Very good. Possibly when they meet up, Toby. That's a nice example too. Now, in terms of the play, right, so just thinking about what this play is about, because we have our plot, you know, this happens, then this happens, then this happens. But the reason I highlighted some of these things, firstly, working class, okay? So Mrs. Johnson is a working class mother. Class is a hierarchy of power, typically because you're studying English literature within Britain. Okay? Class is many things, right? Class is your parents and what they did for a living. It's the school that you went to. It's the amount of money you have. It's a very, very complex thing. But ultimately, this is a play about class, okay? And the opportunities that people from higher classes have over those who are in lower classes, right? That's what Blood Brothers is about. Harris, Volta is specifically for poetry. So we're not writing about that in terms of drama. Scrooge, no, you won't. I'm sure that's not a serious question. So that's the first thing to mention. This is a play about class. It's about hierarchies of power within Britain and the way that the working classes are essentially placed into a downtrodden position by nature of where they're born and how they're born. Tiny Tim, we're going to go through structure towards the end. Cuckoo, do I need to have loads of context in my essays? Well, context is worth 6 marks. So that's about 20% of the grade, of the marks, of the total marks. 2 seconds, people. Thank you. Okay. The next thing is around the suburbs. Okay, so suburbs are obviously kind of wealthier parts of town. Okay, wealthier parts of town. Can we talk about why Miss Johnson gets compared to Marilyn Monroe? We can. It's mainly down to her beauty. University, well, that links into this idea of education. Okay. Education. Okay, and the kind of the privilege and power that we associate with school. Okay. And the last one is this idea of pregnancy, which is obviously a big idea in Blood Brothers, and namely the way that women who, particularly at this time and in these kind of societies, women's lives become entirely altered by pregnancy. Now, someone asked again about context. This is context, Esme. We're talking about context right now. When we're talking about class, we're talking about context. When we're talking about the suburbs and the places that people live, we're talking about context. When you're talking about education, Mickey's school, the secondary modern that he goes to, that's all to do with context. When you're talking about the privileges and power associated with schools, you're talking about context. When you're talking about the cycle of poverty, Sarah, exactly, you are talking about context. Remember, in English, what examiners do not want to see, they do not want to see you just, writing down paragraph after paragraph of information, things that you know about Liverpool, for example. They want to see how you can link the context, the things that you've learnt, with the question, and the text itself. And then when I come on to planning some answers later, I will show you exactly what I mean by that. But I just have to say, the first thing to getting a 7 or above is, do you know the story? And as we've seen here, we do. And 2, do you know a little bit about the background? Okay, the plot and the genre and that. Now, in terms of quotes, I've got 10 key quotes here. You may well have other ones that you have learned already. These are 10 that I think you can use in any essay. Okay, irrespective of question, these are 10 key quotes that you should know. So I'm going to start in a weird way at the end. Mrs. Johnson's lament. Now, a lament, good little word to use, is a sad song. Okay, particularly after a death. And we know who Mrs. Johnson has lost. She's lost both Mickey and Edward. She says, tell me it's not true. Say it's just a story. Now, I think this is a great quote for this particular reason. It is just a story. Okay, it is just a story. Blood Brothers is not true. Okay, it's not, it didn't happen. We're not watching a documentary. However, it reflects true experience. Okay, so this is essentially a line that shows the way that fiction can have real world power. That's again something that you would want to link to Russell's overall message that British society needs to support the working classes better. So when she says, tell me it's not true, say it's just a story, in many ways we could answer, you're right. However, the things that she's talking about are true. So while this story is not, the general truth is there. Did you never hear of the mother so cruel that there's a stone in place of her heart? Now, I think that the narrator is a fascinating character because remember, the narrator acts as the Greek chorus. M2 King, you've asked me a great question. What about the language device? The language device is there. It's a lament. It's a lament. The structure is the fact that it comes at the end. Yeah, it comes at the end of the play. Examiners want to see you talking about the structure of the play itself, right? So method, lament, at the end, structure. So he acts as the Greek chorus. The role of the Greek chorus was to pass judgment on characters. But you as an audience can respond and say, well, actually, do I agree? Now, he calls Mrs. Lyons, right? He calls her cruel, and says that there's a stone in place of her heart, which I guess is obviously a metaphor, isn't it? And this adjective here. Now, is she? Is she cruel? I guess we have an opportunity here for something that's important in English, which is alternative interpretation. On the one hand, she is cruel because of the way that she manipulates Mrs. Johnson. But on the other hand, she's not because she's driven by the desire to be a mother. She's just doing whatever she can to be a mother. HJB09. We were going over this quote today in class. My teacher was saying it sort of reflects the views of the middle class biased views against the working classes. We're here till 8:30. I don't know. I mean, the narrator is classless in a way. Mrs. Lyons is from the middle classes. So if anything, it might be. I mean, who's biased there? Because I would actually say that it's looking at, as I've said, the way that Mrs. Lyons kind of manipulates to get what she wants. You can argue on the other side that she's doing it because she just wants to be a mum. Again, the narrator, he's a character that students talk about so rarely, but he is really what I would term the anchor of the play. Okay, he anchors the play. And do we blame superstition for what came to pass? Now, this is, again, an important line because superstition is one of our key themes. One of our key themes, right? What do we know about superstition? Well, superstition guides Mrs. Johnston's actions, okay? Because she is superstitious. But there's an argument that we can make as well that superstition, right? Superstition acts as a replacement for fate, right? Acts as a replacement for fate. Was the death of Mickey and Edward inevitable? Now, when we say responsibility, could I say that the narrator acts as a moral compass? Absolutely. You know, so much of these quotes are about the questions that they raise. Who will take responsibility for the working classes? Right, a debt is a debt and must be paid. Again, I'm focusing on the narrator. I think that he's an important character. I think it's one that students tend to miss a lot. It's easy to write about Mickey and Edward. Is it always as easy to bring the narrator in? A debt is a debt and must be paid. You know, again, bear in mind at the start of the play, Mrs. Johnston is in debt. Okay, she's in debt. She's in debt to, the magazines that she owes money to. She's in debt to the milkman. Okay, and in general, this reflects debt as a, what would you call it? As an aspect of working class life, right? As an aspect of working class life. Okay, again, this is Willie Russell making the comment, why are we allowing poor people to get themselves into more debt? Okay, and of course this reflects this idea that, she gave away her child, and the debt is obviously this passing of Edward over, and, if they discover that they are twins, then they will die. But there's something else bigger going on here, which is not just a comment about Edward and Mickey's conclusions, it's a comment in general about debt. Okay, and debt is something that keeps the working classes poor. Normality of working class society. Yeah, exactly. It's part of the normal pass and parcel. For this quote, there's a girl inside the woman. She's waiting to get free. Now, there's a kind of, firstly, there's a juxtaposition here, isn't there, between girl and woman. But the girl has this kind of innocence, okay, and it's society that has corrupted this. Now, just on this quote, someone asked earlier about why Mrs. Johnston is so regularly referred to as Marilyn Monroe. And there's two reasons. Number one, obviously, she is beautiful, like Marilyn Monroe. But also, Marilyn Monroe, her life was corrupted by fame in the same way. So Marilyn Monroe is essentially used, and if you want the method, okay, if you want the method that you would write about in the exam, in many ways she's used as an allegory. Right, I'm conscious of time because we're obviously shorter here for Blood Brothers before we move on. These ones are probably a little bit more classic that you will have seen before, and I want to get to the part where we plan some questions together because I think that's what you're going to need tomorrow the most. I could have been him. Well, look, regret. Okay? There's a sense of regret, there's a sense of sadness, and ultimately, this comes back to an idea of nature versus nurture. Okay, nature versus nurture. Okay, in another life, in another world, Mickey could have been him. Mrs. Lyons reacting to see Edward as a baby. You never told me it was a little boy. This comes back to her desire for children. Braham Peak, could you say that Marilyn Monroe is used as a recurring motif in the play? Absolutely. I would again also refer to her as an allegory for Mrs. Johnston. She goes through similar things. She's beautiful, she has everything, and the world is taken from her. The narrator repeatedly says, the devil's got your number. There's not much religion in this play, but the devil acts as a symbol of a few things, I guess. Evil, temptation, and also possibly superstition. Edward's innocent question to Mickey, why is a job so important? Well, again, this comes back to Edward's hamartia, okay, his naivety. What about in I could have been him? Well, I would probably just, again, you could, if you need to talk about something, talk about the personal pronoun. But look, guys, when you're talking about methods, it's not like with every single quote you have to identify, a simile, a metaphor, etc., etc. Examiners are more interested in your ideas than they are in your ability to say that this is a metaphor or a simile or whatever it might be. Last but not least, the revelation. This ties the tragic conclusion. Okay. Just as a brief reminder, people, AO1, your ideas, okay, so your ideas about this play get you 12 marks. Okay, look here, just coming back to textual references. Now, look, your examiners are going to be more forgiving, right? They're going to be more forgiving. I don't think Linda would come up as a question personally because I don't think there's quite enough to say about her. I think if we can look at the trends of the previous paper, paper one, they're going to ask you questions that everybody can write about. But when it says textual references, it says here including quotations. It doesn't say only quotations. Your examiners know that you do not have an extract for this question. All of the quotes are coming from up here. If you have, and please, if you have a great idea but no quote, just write it anyway. Use a reference. The way that you use a reference is just by saying the moment of the play when, and then just describe. Please, if you do not have a quote for a part that you want to write about, just describe the part itself. Okay? Do not leave good ideas, right? Do not leave good ideas just because you can't think of a quote. You're going to get two choices of questions for him, remember. She can come up with a relationship with Mickey. She could. I mean, look, I'm not going to be doing predictions. Neither I nor Louis will be doing predictions because there's no point. We're just going to try and cover as many ideas as we can before tomorrow. Diana, what do I mean? Just describe it. So you would say, let's say, for example, you couldn't think of a quote to describe Mickey's time at secondary school. So instead of wasting that idea because you can't think of quote, you'll just say, the moment of the play when we see Mickey at secondary school, we discover that his time at school was a very negative experience with poor teaching and poor teachers, and ultimately it ends for him being suspended or excluded. Right, AO2 is writer's methods. Again, that's also worth 12 marks. AO3 is context. It's only worth 6. Okay. And then AO4 is obviously spelling, punctuation, and grammar. Right? So remember, context informs your analysis. Okay? We don't make ideas themselves just about context. We use it to inform our analysis. Right. Let's have a look at this question. So, how does Russell use the characters of Mrs. Johnston and Mrs. Lyons in Blood Brothers to explore ideas about class? Well, let's say you've got a question like this. Here's what I would probably write about. Firstly, I would talk about the way that Mrs. Johnston and Mrs. Lyons each represent different classes. Mrs. Johnston represents the working class, and Mrs. Lyons represents the kind of middle upper. Okay? Now, what are the ideas about class? Well, firstly, one, class dictates your life outcomes. Two, okay, classes, what's the word? Classes desire aspects of each other. Okay, what I mean by that is the working classes look to the upper classes and say, well, I wish they had their money, or I wish I had their access. Okay, but in this play, someone from the middle class looks down to the working classes and says, I wish I had your ability to have children. Okay, so classes desire aspects of each other. 3, class, maybe something along the lines of like higher classes manipulate the lower. Okay. In terms of how many paragraphs, simple stuff, people. It's the same paragraph structure that you did for paper 1 last week. It's a thesis statement, okay, aka an introduction, and then it's 3 paragraphs. Now, I've got my ideas for 3 paragraphs here. Class dictates your life outcomes, class desires aspects of each other, and then higher classes manipulate the lower. How would I link that back to Mrs. Johnston, Mrs. Lyons? As I've said, introduction and then 3 paragraphs. So, Mrs. Lyons, she's a cleaner, okay? You know, she continues to work, you know, she struggles. Mrs. Johnston is a stay-at-home, well, initially a stay-at-home wife, later a stay-at-home mum. So this is obviously a position of privilege. I've got a planned introduction. Is that a good thing? Toby, I've also got very similar. I mean, I don't plan my introductions, but I have a rough like idea of how I would structure my paragraph, my introductions, and then I adapt that for the question. That is absolutely fine. Classes desire aspects of each other. Mrs. Lyons looks to Mrs. Johnston. Sorry, Mrs. Johnston looks to Mrs. Lyons. Yes, you're right, guys. That was me going too fast. Mrs. Johnston, Mrs. Lyons. Right, Mrs. Johnston. Thank you, everybody. So I'm going too quick. There's just too much to get out. There's too much to write about with this. Thank you, everybody. See, that shows me that you've been doing your revision and that you're paying attention. So thank you. Right, Mrs. Johnston looks to Mrs. Lyons for her wealth. Mrs. Lyons looks to Mrs. Johnston for her children. Okay? Both of these things are obviously very important parts of life. Thank you, James. I appreciate that. And last but not least, the higher classes manipulate the lower classes. Well, I would look at the way that Mrs. Lyons manipulates Mrs. Johnston, okay, for her child. So that would be my essay plan for this question. Remember, in your introductions, what you want to make sure that you get in there always is your idea. So how would I write my introduction for this question? Look at the question, how does Russell use Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Lyons in Blood Brothers to explore ideas about class? I would always get the names of the characters in their early doors. Through the characters of Mrs. Johnston and Mrs. Lyons, Russell explores the way in which class dictates the life outcomes of individuals long before they are born. Then I would want to get something contextual in, just small. Writing at a time of great social upheaval under the reign of Thatcher, Russell attempts to warn audiences about the way that class restricts individuals, particularly women. Very good, successful, valiant. And this is your kind of introduction structure, is it? Fahim, we're for AQA focus, so Christmas Carol was last week. So you can probably go back and watch Louis' stream from that. Okay, by exploring ideas relating to manipulation, desire, and jealousy, Russell poignantly, tragically explores ideas about class. Okay, so that would be my introduction, and then my 3 paragraphs would be these. Okay. Now I could actually, I'm going to copy this and bring this back later. If we look at another question, I can pretty much roughly use that same, at least those same sentence starters with that. So what about this? Why don't you throw some ideas in the chat for me, please? How does Russell present the impact of superstition on characters' lives? How does Russell present the impact of superstition? Who are we going to write about? Which characters? Because remember, this is a theme question. Ashes, we have to start with although or despite to show the comparison. But who are we comparing? Do you mean comparing Mrs. Johnston and Mrs. Lyons? Hope everyone's got a little snack. I'm going for cashews today. So 1, superstition is used as a tool of manipulation. Good, really good. Okay, 1. So we could also say superstition reflects a lack of education. I would also say if superstition were to come up, you'd want to say something like superstition acts as a manifestation of fate. Okay? Because that's basically what superstition is, isn't it? It's like if you step onto drains, something bad is going to happen to you. Okay, it's this idea of fate. Could you also say it's a tool of oppression by the upper classes? Yeah, absolutely. That's if I was going to go for superstition to use as a tool of manipulation. Yeah, it's also a form of oppression by the upper classes. So here, for this one, obviously the first idea I'm going to be talking about, which characters? Well, specifically, I'm probably going to look at Mrs. Johnston being manipulated by Mrs. Lyons. Okay. Then bring in the lack. Russell presents superstitions as a driving force and ammunition for the play. Then bring in the lack of education leading to the cycle of social class. Yeah, so the lack of education. I mean, if you're talking about education, you're going to want to talk about Mickey specifically and the way that this creates a cycle of oppression, really. As a manifestation of fate, well, again, the kind of tragic outcome, that I could have been him. Could you say that the working class possibly use superstition as a way of making sense of the difficulties in their life? You could. What I'm doing, all of these are fantastic ideas, people, exceptional. What I'm trying to say with these big, like, topic sentences for my paragraphs is I can then bring in deeper ideas beneath them, right? So, for example, a way of making sense of the difficulties, well, we could include that here, couldn't we? So, a way of making sense, yeah, or it could even go in here. Maybe also superstition, I would say superstition appears to fill the void of religion in Blood Brothers, because the working classes are typically not religious, or at least at this time, these inner city places. What fills that spiritual hole? You know, and in this case, the thing that fills it is superstition. Okay, and Mrs. Lyons is aware of that, and she uses that to her advantage over Mrs. Johnston. Now, look, if I just take out the main ideas from my um, first paragraph, through the characters of, well, in this case, it wouldn't be characters, right? Through the theme of superstition, what does Russell do? Well, he explores the way in which the working classes are exploited in their lack of education by those above them who play into their sense of fear, right? Writing at a time of social upheaval, Russell attempts to use the Johnstons as a symbol of the negative effects of superstition in order to warn audiences about the working classes' propensity to manipulation. Propensity is a word that means how they tend towards something, right? And then I would just talk very briefly: manipulation, education, fate, acting as a surrogate for the tragic theme of fate. Superstition shows that people often feel their negative outcomes are destined. Okay? And that would set me up nicely to move into my essay proper. Okay, we've got 7 minutes. I think we've got time for one more question for sure. And this is one that I think is very interesting. I've never really seen a question like this come up, but this is certainly a massive theme of Blood Brothers. How does Russell explore the idea of nature versus nurture? Now remember, just in a nutshell, nature, are we born who we are, or are we made who we are? Right? Are we born who we are, or are we made who we are? Now, just on this is Russell's perspective. Okay? Russell feels that we are made who we are by society. Okay, we are made this way by society. What I mean by society is government, culture, and education. Okay, these three things act together, right? These three things act together to make us who we are. Because if it were nature, then Mickey and Edward should be identical. Okay, but something steps in to change the outcomes of their lives. And the thing that steps in is society. So for this question, I would largely just focus this question on Mickey and Edward. Okay? And I would look at the ways in which their lives are made different by society. If you want a final little kind of tip from me, remember this: you can't write about everything. You can only write about the question, right? So Mickey, obviously, poor school, low self-esteem, a sense of paranoia, and ultimately no safety net. Russell opposes Thatcher's view that people can succeed by hard work alone. It's the corrupt class system within society that truly ends up shaping people's lives. You know, that's so good, that I'm going to pop that onto this PowerPoint for people to see, because that's a really good way of putting it. Even better, I'd say, than I could have put it myself. Right? And Sarah, yours is also similarly very good, that they're products of their environment. What else would you explore for this question apart from Mickey and Edward? I mean, you can take a broader look at characters. So, like, you can look at the way that Mrs. Lyons and Mrs. Johnston, both women, okay, but very different. Okay, both women, but very different. So, you know, Mrs. Lyons lives largely in comfort and ultimately has power, whereas Mrs. Johnston lives in poverty and is ultimately powerless. They're both women, but society has made it that way, right? Could you also look at, well, maybe on the opposite side, if you wanted to present a counter argument, could we look at Sammy and how his nature was evil? You know, there's obviously a lot of foreshadowing. A lot of foreshadowing with Sammy, you know, especially with the gun. You know, firstly, it's a toy gun, and then it's a real gun. He obviously threatens to stab that bus conductor. You know, could we argue maybe that actually Sammy's an example of the natural evil, I would say. What context other than Margaret Thatcher? I would talk in terms of context other than Margaret Thatcher, Liverpool as a city of class contrast. Okay. Is Sammy evil though, or just a product of neglect? That's up for you to decide. Remember that the whole point of English is to marry up these three things: text, author, audience. Okay, so with someone like Sammy, well, what do you think? What do you think? You know, do you think that he's a evil character, or do you think that he was made that way? Is it neglect? Again, we could also make that distinction. I think the point that, what do I mean by Liverpool? I mean the city. M2 King, we can, but unfortunately, it's now time for us to change over. Um, it's now time for us to change over. So we're going to give everybody about 5 minutes now to jump to the either to stay here with me for power and conflict, or to move over to Louis. Sorry, to stay here with me for love and relationships, or to move over to Louis for power and conflicts. Okay, so the link for Louis' stream is in the description. We're going to kick off again at 6:35. 6:35. Hello, Amber. Welcome. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going to open my window because it's very hot in here. If that's okay. Welcome. So yeah, there's some free last minute resources, revision resources, which obviously you can scan and find in the description. Stay here for love and relationships poetry. Head over to Louis for power and conflict. Thank you so much, everybody. I know it was speedy, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. Welcome. If you're joining me from Louis' stream, we're going to make a start in 5 minutes. I'm going to eat a few cashew nuts and wait for everybody to join us. Louis still going? Well, he won't be too long. He obviously had quite a lot of people. Let me double check what's going on in his stream. Well, maybe he's forgotten. The link, Navida, is in the description. If you want to check it. Hello, Zara. Welcome. Yeah, Braham Pete, I can. Welcome, Hepzibah. Good to see your face again, or your name. How much is a grade 4 or 5 in literature? Like what level? Like how many marks, Valiant? Is that what you mean by how many? Like marks? I mean, in terms of, I mean, grade boundaries change every single year, but roughly, a grade 9 is about 90% of the marks. A grade 7 is about 70% of the marks. A grade 5 is about 50%, but it changes every single year, right? Grade 4 is 40%, roughly. Some years it might be 93%, it might be, 71%, etc. It sort of fluctuates depending on how people do. Nadia, is it strange that my school is doing Animal Farm alongside love and relationships? No, everyone's got an option. Everyone's got a choice. Um, you know, different schools choose different ones. Right, we're going to make a start in 1 minute. I know Louis is still going, but I've got a lot to get on with, and people will join us when they can. Hope you're all ready. Have you all had? I'm going to get myself a little Werther's original as we move into this next section. Abby, what is my favorite poem ever, or from Love and Relationships? Welcome. If you're just joining me from Louis' stream, we're here to do love and relationships poetry. Please subscribe so that you can ask me questions on these poems. Please smash that like button. How many likes are we at already? We're at 39. Wow, that's poor. Can we get that up to 100? Can we get that up to 100 likes? Cool. Hannes, yes, I do remember you. Welcome. It's good to have you here. Right, we're going now for an hour and 10 minutes. Okay, until 7:45, when we'll move on to unseen poetry. Make sure you're subscribed. If you're just joining me, welcome. Smash that like button, turn on those notifications. Obviously, we're moving through the language after this. Welcome, Matthew. Good to have so many here. Okay. Now, hello, Sia. Welcome. How are you doing? How's life? Are you getting on well? If you're joining us from Louis' stream, I hope it went well. The way that we're going to do this, so we're going to go through. Oh, but Dara, no, we're just starting now. The way that we're going to do this is we're going to go through four pairs, okay, of poems, okay, in detail, because I don't know what poem's coming up tomorrow, but with these four, we would have covered 8. At least one of these poems, I guarantee you will write about tomorrow, whether that's because they give it to you, or whether that's because you choose to write about it. Now, how many poems do you recommend we learn? Well, you need to know, when you say learn, that's a bit of a complex question because you need to learn 15. You need to know a line from each one at least. Okay? But please, before we begin, remember, they give you a poem, right? They give you a poem. They give you Winter Swans or When We Two Parted or whatever it might be. Use the one that they give you as the anchor. You use the one to really analyze and then bring in another poem. The one that you choose is best. Okay? So, let's get going. No time like the present. Compare how poets present relationships in Winter Swans and in one other poem. When We Two Parted is the one that I've chosen. Min 233, no extract for the modern texts. So, where do we begin? Well, can you pop into the chat for me, please? What is the message about relationships in Winter Swans? What is the message about relationships in Winter Swans? Because I always think that with these, you need to start thinking about the message. Okay, and once we've got 2 messages, then we can start to think about comparisons. Mia, we'll come to structures and stuff a bit later. Let's just work on some last-minute revision of these poems. What is the message for Winter Swans in terms of relationships? Yeah, you've got it there, Daniel. Well done. There is always hope that reconciliation can be achieved. Okay, no matter how bad it gets, you can always find a way to come back together. Okay. Reconciliation, coming back together. The poem is commenting on the importance of communication and reconciliation. Great. I love that this word is coming up so much. That's really, really good. Okay, so there is always hope that reconciliation can be achieved. Now, same question, but for When We Two Parted. What is the message of When We Two Parted in terms of relationships? When we two parted in silence and tears, half broken, half hearted, to sever for years. Pale grew thy cheek and cold, colder thy kiss. What's the message here? Successful, valiant. I'm not part Jamaican. No, I'm not. Love can never be rebuilt. Exactly. So, like, once love is over, it can never return. Okay, that's one. Look, everyone's messages are correct. Like, relationships can hurt so much, they can be hard to move on. Absolutely. There's a guilt in a forbidden love. The struggles after a relationship breakup. Now, we've got two messages. Can we find a way of kind of combining these into a comparison? Okay, how can we compare these two poems? They give us Winter Swans. We're going to compare it to When We Two Parted. So, Sarah, so would we compare When We Two Parted to Winter Swans? Yeah, you could. Yeah, they're opposing poems. So Winter Swan shows the hope in difficult relationships, whereas, and that's our When We Two Parted shows how relationships can end. Okay? So if we just use things like critiques in our essay, will we still get context marked? Does content have to be specifically about the poet? Yeah, it does. I'm not a big fan GCSE level of critics, to be honest with you. No, there's no requirement in the mark scheme for you to do that. When We Two Parted has some hope at the end because he says, "How should I greet thee?" He does have a hope and a meeting, but "How should I greet you?" with silence and tears. That suggests that it's probably not going to end that well. Note how my opening there also, people, has a nice little connective, comparative connective. Remaking of a relationship versus breaking of a relationship. Would the question ask you to compare differences or similarities? Gina, it doesn't specify. You can write about both similarities and differences. Right, then what we need to think about is, well, what quotes would we use? Right, so we've got our messages in each poem. We've got an idea of how we would compare them. Now we need, so there is always hope that reconciliation can be achieved. Let's go through. Winter Swans. Well, I would start with the title of the poem. And, you know, swans mate for life. They're obviously used as a metaphor for hope, right? Then I need, how many quotes do you need to use from each poem? What do people think about the number of quotes we need to use from each poem? Any ideas on that number? Any thoughts? Swans are a symbol for hope, absolutely. But what about in terms of the number of quotes you're using from each poem? Yeah, Mintu, 4, 5, 3 to 5, Ritual, absolutely, nice one. Ritual, can you analyze the title in your paragraph? Absolutely, you can analyze anything that's on the page there. So the clouds had given their all, 2 days of rain and then a break. So I would definitely start off by outlining the way that this poem does show some sense of things going badly. I would want to write about this line, until the swans came and stopped us, because that shows the volta, right, the turn in the poem. I would want this line, they mate for life, you said as they left. And then obviously, our hands had swum the distance between us. Those are the kind of core of my quotes. Now, can I just emphasize it's the same thing that I said in my last stream. You can't write about everything. You need to focus on the quotes that will help you to answer the question. So yeah, we've got some good methods here, don't we? We've got the use of pathetic fallacy, right? We've got again another reference to swans and the Volta of the poem. We've got the second person address, but also that sense of hope. And then you've got this kind of possessive of our hands swum the distance, and then this metaphor to show reconciliation. Okay, so that's the evidence that I'd use, right? Again, my message is here. There is always hope that reconciliation could be achieved. Now let's move over to when we two parted. Let's go for a different color, shall we? Let's go for light blue. Once love is over, it can never return. So obviously, the title and the first line are going to be lines that I'd write about. Now let's pretend for a second that this is a poem that I'm kind of bringing. Okay, so I'm probably not going to be able to remember the whole thing. What are the lines from this poem? Put them in the chat, please. What are the lines from this poem that people know? Like the key lines. Could you say that somehow shows that they didn't realize, but they had started reconciling? Yeah, you could. Guys, I guarantee you that you're going to have a slightly different set of ideas about this than I do. That's the great thing about poetry. Okay? What I'm trying to show you is how I would approach. Silence and tears, good because that's repeated. You know, we've got the cyclical structure. I'll come back to that in a second. I would say that thy vows are all broken and a knell in mine ear. Those are the ones that have always stood out to me. Now, what do we need to say about those lines? Well, the title already shows a disconnect through that verb, parted. We've got the cyclical structure of silence and tears being repeated to show the cycle of sadness, the cycle of emotional pain. Great stuff, guys. Half broken, half hearted shows not mutual to sever for years. Irony of all vows being broken, cyclical structure showing entrapment. Very good. The vows, now a vow is obviously a word that means a promise being broken. Again, that's a metaphor. Once again, to show pain, the end of love. The knell, this auditory image in mine ear, right? Again, everything links back to emotional damage, no, turmoil. Okay. Now, people, I'm going to do something here and I'm going to preface it with a warning. Okay, if you've been with my Headspace since September, when I first did this back in September, you will have seen this before. If you are new, you know, this is your first time with me because you're a genius who's joined this stream. I don't want to step on the toes of your teachers. Okay, so if your teachers have taught you how to structure this, I would go by what they have said. However, that being said, at my Headspace, what we've always taught our students with comparison is you're doing 3 lead, head, paragraphs, okay? And what those stand for is your link, okay? And that's a link to the question, evidence, analysis, dissection, hook, as in hook up, when you bring the poems together with your comparison, and then evidence from poem 2. These are all from poem 1. Analysis from poem 2, and dissection from poem 2. Okay. Now, some people are saying C. Yes, there is also C for context, but context, we could put anywhere really. Okay, we kind of move it about as we wish. Hello, Param, welcome. So, 3 lead-head paragraphs. Obviously, you also need an introduction. Now, what are we going to write about? What would we write about for this question? Well, we need 3 distinct and very clear ideas. So, for example, we might say, for paragraph 1, both poems explore difficulties in relationships. Okay, but obviously poem 1 shows the conclusion, poem 2 poem 1 shows a reconciliation, poem 2 shows a breakup. Okay, you might say things like, for example, both poems are highly emotive. Okay, they're both very emotional poems in different ways. So obviously the overriding emotion here is hope, and the overriding emotion here is despair. Okay? Could I compare Winter Swans and Climbing My Grandpa? But they're the only poems I've done. Look, the exam is tomorrow. Okay, I'm here with the making an assumption that students are aware of the poems. Okay, and I'm just showing you, last minute ideas for which pairs we could go through. And last but not least, I thought we had English on Tuesday, sir. Yes, tomorrow is Tuesday. The English exam is tomorrow. Both use natural imagery to convey their sadness / hope. Okay? Hello, Farah, welcome. Now, that is, the basis of an essay. We've got the comparison, and we've got our 3 ideas, and we've got the evidence that we would use. We're going to do this 3 more times, and then I'm going to get you in here to vote for which question we practice writing up. Okay, because I want to cover as many poems as I can. But I'm not going to have time to write up each poem. Okay, so the most important thing is we cover a few poems. Then I'm going to ask you in a moment, once we've been through the next 3, to pick for me which one you want to write together. Okay, for the last little bit. Right, let's have a look at a different question. Now, I went back through and looked at, past questions. Mostly they all say things like relationships, and then they mostly all say things like relationships between something and something. Could we do, well, let's wait until we get there. Sorry for those of you I didn't explain, obviously, the lead-head E is obviously evidence, the quote that you choose. Analysis is where you analyze that quote and think about the suggestions and the ideas, etc., etc. The dissection would be where you zoom in on a small part of that quote. Right, let's do the same thing again. Same thing again. So, what is the message in Eden Rock about the relationship between parents and children? Yeah, what is the message about the relationship between parents and children in Eden Rock? Any ideas? Do I suggest that you learn 3 quotes? You could do. It's a strong bond. Okay, Arifa, you're onto something there for sure. That love is so strong that it extends past life. Okay, good. That child admires his children. Okay, so um, yeah, so like I guess this depends on your interpretation of the poem. I've always taught this poem as a poem really about the afterlife and the way that our parents, that their role as parents exists beyond the grave, right? So I feel that the last section of this poem, I had not thought that it would be like this, is actually the narrator describing the passage to the afterlife, right? But again, you might have had a different interpretation. You might feel it's something slightly different. But I'm going to go down one that I've seen that's really good, which is Megan's. That the kind of the message here is that parental love um, is unconditional and continuous even after death. Okay, that's my kind of idea, really, right? Eden Rock transcends physical, exactly. Now, the message in Follower is that one day children will parent their parents. So really it's a poem about the changing nature of relationships, particularly between parent and child. The cruelty of aging, all of that comes into it. The role reversal within the parent-child relationship, absolutely that comes into it. Um, Christinian, parents are dead, beg the son to join them in Eden Rock. Good, not real place, relates to the Garden of Eden. Absolutely. All of this stuff will bring in. But remember, before you get to this is all brilliant. But remember, we need to have like some ideas that we anchor at the top. And then underneath that, we can bring in all of these great ideas. Will, you're right. It is the way that the son looked. Well, it's kind of a weird one. The majority of it seems like he's looking after up to his father, but then in the last bit, we see that the father is stumbling behind me and will not go away. That's because the thing has changed. When he was young, he looked up to his dad. He was like, "My dad's so strong. My dad's incredible. You know, he's this wonderful, powerful man." But now things have changed. Um, it's not me who's a nuisance anymore. It's him, right? The roles have reversed, right? So we need to put this into a comparative statement, don't we? Compare how poets present relationships between parents and children in Eden Rock and in one other poem. So Eden Rock explores a child's reliance on their parents even into the afterlife, Whereas, that's my little comparative word again, follower explores the way children eventually care for their parents. Lots of comments about like predictions and stuff, guys. I don't do predictions. Okay, we've seen the detriment of predictions this exam series. There's no point, especially with poetry. They've repeated poems before. Okay, it just could yes, sing song has come up, but sing song could come up again. Okay, there's no point in getting hooked onto this. We just need to cover as much as we can. Okay, in terms of this. When you're comparing poems, you need context for both of them. Ideally, yes, but you can probably get away with only writing about the context of the poem that they give you. Right? So let's go back to, so parental love is unconditional and oh, that's a terrible choice of color, isn't it? Is unconditional and continuous even after death. So what are we going to write about? What are our kind of key lines from Eden Rock? We've already got something great that we can say about the title. I've seen it already come up a few times. This is obviously a biblical allusion, Eden being paradise. You have connotations of, kind of heaven. Example of chiasmus within follower syntactic structure used to reflect the changing power of dynamics. Yep, that's a good little structural idea. We'll come to follower in a minute. Let's just focus on Eden Rock for a bit. I really like the opening here. They are waiting for me somewhere beyond Eden Rock. Okay, so the fact that they are waiting, this verb here, waiting, shows this sense of kind of care and protection. Okay, really early on, first line. What else? What other good lines stand out to us in terms of this idea of parental love being unconditional and continuous? There's also, I think, also in this poem, there's that sense of admiration. So we have the figures of father, mother, this sense of beauty and power and protection. But look, let me remind you, it may well be tomorrow that you cannot write about everything that you want to. Okay, you cannot write about everything that you want to. Successful Valiant, then maybe it will. Good, nice one, Hattie. Really good ideas here. These references to food, this is stuff that is sustenance. This is stuff that protects and provides. Beckon to me. Crossing is not as hard as you might think. And then the last line, and then something that I'll mention in a moment, which is the gap between this and this. Nice one, Christinium. That's another great idea. 3 sons not real or in the afterlife or memory is blurry. 3 is a holy number associated with the Trinity. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So let me keep it on purple. The father and mother, these nouns, okay, again, they show love, right? We love our mothers, we love our fathers. What is the terrier doing? It's trembling at his feet, showing his father's power and his protection that he extends not only to this dog but also to the speaker. Her hair takes on the light. Okay, so there's this sense of purity and beauty. Guys, Eden Rock is quatrains, which gives it a calm rhythmic flow. Absolutely, except it towards the end. These are domestic images here. Thermos, HP, bottle of sauce. Obviously reflects like the British identity of the speaker. Its formal is separating. Beckon to me, another good little verb to show kind of encouragement. And then here, now I have always said that the space between, so firstly, there's a break in stanza, okay, which breaks the quatrains into 3 and 1. Another reference to 3 here and Trinity. But I think that the gap between this and this, the gap reflects the gap between life and death. Okay? The gap between life and death. So in that silence, because that's what's kind of going on here, and then this final line, I had not thought that it would be like this. The it is dying. Yeah, Ukpok Kudu Becky, the gap shows the distance between life and death. Absolutely. Like he hasn't crossed the river yet. And this could be River Styx, you know, this classic Greek myth, you know, this kind of the passage between life and death was a river. Something to think about. Okay, I'm just looking at the time. Now, follower. So we've got loads and loads of information, don't we, about Eden Rock. And that is the thing. You will end up writing more about the poem that they give you. That is okay. That is okay. That's kind of what you're supposed to do. Your examiner knows that the other poem, you're bringing the quotes from memory. So, but what they won't forgive is you neglecting the poem that they've given you. The river is a metaphor between life and death. Absolutely. That's a great thing to write about. Now, follower, we just need a few little quotes. One day children will parent their parent, the changing nature of relationships. So firstly, we see my father worked with horseplow. His shoulders glowed like a full sail strung. That is again showing his father's power and his authority. I despise literature paper too. Don't worry about it. Look, you're going to do it and you're going to do well. I believe in you. Don't stress. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. And you too, Sarah. I stumbled in his hobnail wake. Please throw in any other lines that you like from follower. Bella, you keep mentioning this reversal of roles using chiasmus, syntactic structure. Would you explain a little bit more? I was a nuisance, tripping, falling, yapping always, but now it is my father who keeps stumbling behind me. Right? So this shows us the changing nature of their relationship. I stumbled in that verb there, stumbled, suggests a kind of clumsiness, doesn't it? And again, his father's power. We have this tricolon, I was a nuisance, tripping and falling, right? We have an adjective followed by 2 verbs. But now it is my father, and we have that possessive language who keeps stumbling behind me. Now the stumbling shows his father's weakness. Oh, excuse me, that's behind my back. The father's weakness. Right? So there we have, again, this. Now look, again, just in terms of stanza length, it's 4 lines. They're both poems use quatrains to show I guess, the kind of authority and consistency of parents. That's other things that you can say about like rhyme, plow, strung, farrow, tongue, the A, B, again, the consistency, the power, the authority. But can I just remind students, once again, I've said this many times, a grade 2 response and a grade 9 response both begin the same way. The use of, in this case, the use of a quatrain, okay? It's what comes after that's going to get you the marks, okay? It's what comes after that's going to get you the marks. Or the continuous strong bond between the two. I love that too, absolutely. Now, we need 3 ideas, 1, 2, and 3. Again, let's come back. Eden's Rock explores a child's reliance on their parents, even into the afterlife, whereas Follow explores the way children eventually care for their parents. So both poems show parents to be protective and authoritative, right? What is the effect of the father who keeps summoning? Why is the fact he is now weak makes an effect? Well, the effect is the fact that he has changed. His position as a character in this poem has changed, right? He was originally this working with a horse plow, full sail strung. The speaker walked in his wake, etc. But now it's the opposite way around. I guess you could say that in Eden Rock shows a speaker dying, whereas in Follower, the father is the one dying. And then I would probably finish up just by explaining that both poems show the impact parents have on their children. Okay? Sophie, do you have to talk about structure and form in one separate paragraph? No. No. Guys, if you imagine, like, if I just very quickly, let me draw you. This is an essay, right? A poetry essay. Let's call, let me just do 3 colors here, right? And let's call them language, form, and structure, okay? Now, mostly your essays will focus on language. That's fine, okay? So you might have, dotted around here, little bits of language analysis talking about the way that writers use simile, metaphor, etc. Okay? That's generally what students tend to write about, and that's great. Now, in terms of form, like the type of poem, if you were to just mention it like here, okay, and structure, maybe a little bit more here, and a few times down here, that's fine, okay? What we definitely should not be doing, okay, definitely not, is just dumping it all in one, big dump, to use a better expression, right? I don't want to see language, structure, form, right? That's not gonna give your examiner what they want to see, okay? So feel free to just focus really on the language, is what I'm trying to say. Would you use marks to not mention form? No. I've read great grade 9 essays that have the only form things that they've mentioned is like, it's a sonnet, or it uses quatrains, or this stanza, cuts itself short or whatever it might be. But what if an ant remember the structure for the poem I choose to compare with? Should I just talk about the poem, the given poem? Yeah. Do I have the? No, I don't have it here. The mark scheme, it in English, there's not like in the mark scheme, it's like that, must mention form 3 times, must mention structure 3 times. The 12 marks for AO1 and the 12 marks for methods, they're treated holistically. Okay? So what I'm saying is the bulk of your analysis should be based around the language. Okay? And then every so often you might just drop in where relevant, structure and form. Don't do a structural paragraph because there's only so much you can say about stanzas and the order of ideas. You're going to get much more out of writing about the ideas in the poem. Okay, let's have a look at another one. We've got about 2 more to plan, and then I'm going to get you to pick which one you want to focus on, okay? In terms of writing something up. Yes, you do, Matthew. Yes, you do. Right, same again. Let's see how if we can speed this up a little bit now. Seems we've done a few. So, this question is, compare how poets present ideas about the power of love. It's the power of love. Bella, I'm not going to tell you to do something different if it went well for you in your mock. I'm just saying that I'm obviously, there's almost 200 students here, and I need to provide, the best advice for everybody. If you've done something that's worked in your mocks, do it again. Okay? If you're here to find a little bit of a nice little bit of a reminder, then this is what you do. Okay, so thank you to Daniel for your idea there, pal. I like it. So the question is about how writers explore the power of love. So love is a pervasive force in society that is motivated through nature that can lead to frustration. That's interesting. I would say there's something slightly different going on, which is that without physical intimacy, right? Love is purely platonic, right? So the power of love is that we can express ourselves physically. There's a desire, sexual desire here. Now, the reason I've chosen these two is I would actually argue that for the first time in this little moment, we're going to look at 2 poems that basically say the same thing. Because we could say that the message for Sonnet 29 is the same. Okay? For love to be truly powerful, there must be a physical connection. Anna's World. Yes, you can. Yes, you can use those. Rubik's Cube VR, your joke is appalling. It's like, a year 5 would come up with a better joke than that. It's insanely, it's just a boring joke. Well, respectfully. Okay. Right. Bear with me, people. Just dealing with some baby people. Right. So Where was I? Right. So this is for the first time, I guess, one where we could write about these basically the same thing. Hadi, am I with Louis does English? No. He's in his office, I'm in mine. So this is the first time that we can use this. Both poems explore the importance of physical intimacy to fully experience the power of love. Okay? Both poems explore the importance of physical intimacy to fully experience the power of love. Reader, would you say love's philosophy is forcefully telling her to love or doing it gently? It's kind of up to an opinion. Look, the first thing to remember about love's philosophy, and let's start by talking about that, is that this is a romantic poem, and I don't mean necessarily romantic. I mean, it is romantic, like as in, oh, romance, but it's also dealing with the genre, the artistic movement of romanticism, because it's using the power of nature, isn't it? It's basically saying all of these things happen in nature where things mingle together. So why not us? If we are natural creatures who are experiencing natural feelings, then why don't we kiss? That's basically the thing, right? So let's go through key lines. So the fountains mingle with the river, and the rivers with the ocean. Nothing in the world is single. In one spirit, why not I with thine? See the mountains kiss high heaven, and the waves clasp one another. No sister flower would be forgiven if it disdained its brother, and the sunlight clasps the sky, and the moonbeams kiss the sea. What is all this sweet work worth if thou kiss not me? So, I mean, look, you can just come back to with this, and look, sorry, I'm stumbling over my words here, but feel free to just talk about one key theme and idea. Natural imagery, the natural imagery. You can repeat yourself, right? Because that's what's going on here, right? So we've got the fountains mingle. That's a good little verb to show connection, right? And the rivers with the ocean. You can talk about the semantic field of nature. Yep, you've correctly identified there that clasps is a euphemism. What's a euphemism? I guess the simplest way of describing it is it's a hidden sexual reference. We have two of these questions to the recipient. That's structure, talking about questions and the way that they end the line. The motif of nature would be fine. Juliana, can I do the exam for you? Unfortunately, no. We've got things like sunlight implying hope. We've got actions like kiss, a verb, again, this kind of sexual desire. And then lastly, if thou kiss not me. Okay? This religious image too. Right? Same again. Look at sonnet 29. I mean, look, if you've got love's philosophy, it's got to be sonnet 29. Surely. It's got to be sonnet 29. What's the significance of it being at the end of each stanza? Great question. The fact that it's the It's at the end of the stanza to emphasize the speaker's desire. It's the last thing you're left with, isn't it? Now look again at this question, at this poem. I think of thee, my thoughts do twine and bud. Again, we're back with the natural imagery. Natural imagery. Natural imagery. Look how perfect it would be to write about these two. About thee as wild vines about a tree put out broad leaves, and soon there's naught to see except the straggling green which hides the wood. Okay. Oh, yeah. Now if we picked Porphyro's Lovers discussion, would that be okay? Well, yeah, I guess you could talk about obsession. You could kind of spin what I'm saying here, couldn't you? Yeah, oh my palm tree, be it understood, I will not have any thoughts instead of thee, who art dearer, better, rather instantly renew thy presence. As a strong tree, rustle thy boat and set thy trunk all bare, and let these bands of greenery which inspire thee drop heavily down, burst shattered everywhere. Because in this deep joy to see and hear thee, and breathe within thy shadow a new air, I do not think, for I am too near. Okay, so once again, it's all about desire. Just in terms of context, we're talking about female sexual desire, and obviously you could probably throw in that this subverts Victorian expectations about women. Yeah, Mintu, all of this, hide the wood, wink, wink, set thy trunk all bare, wink, wink. Right? It's all kind of, yeah, it's all euphemistic language to talk about sex. Or if not sex itself, then sexual desire. Okay? Twining and budding, to wrap around. She's basically saying, look, when I think of you, I'm thinking of myself wrapping around you. I'm thinking of the way I want you to let everything bare. I want your trunk all bare. I mean, come on. Come on. Obviously, a sonnet, the sonnet form is a love poem. What is a euphemism? I did explain here, Bella. A euphemism is a hidden sexual reference. Well, it doesn't have to be sexual. It's sexual. It's basically when you say something, and if you read between the lines, you kind of see what they really mean. It's a way of, I guess, of hiding your, in this case, hiding sexual desire. Because it's Victorian, so they had to repress things a little bit and not speak about them as much. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so let's just speed through. My 3 points for this would be this question. Number 1, simple. Both poems use natural imagery to convey desire. Both poems hide the power of love behind euphemism. So how's lack of euphemism in Inspector Calls? I don't know why we're talking about Inspector Calls, people. We're talking about poetry here. And number 3, well, if you wanted to include it on the other hand, so love's philosophy shows the male perspective, whereas Nico, how do I know it's a sonnet? It's called Sonnet 29. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 lines. Sonnet 29 shows the female perspective. Okay? That would be for that one. Okay, last but not least, so let's try and get this done in about 5 minutes so we can spend 10 minutes writing one of them up. Kumasami 15 line, what? Right, so walking away, how do poets present, excuse me, that should say typo moment. Let's just change that to avoid any confusion. Um, so how do poets present growing up? So what's the message in terms of walking away for growing up, and what's the message in terms of growing up for climbing my grandfather? Mia, yes, you can also do that. You can also do that after you've analyzed poem two. That's fine. You can do it in the last line as well of the paragraph. So growing up involves letting go of your children, right? Whereas here, growing up involves discovering the truth about your family. Okay? So you could just say, for a comparative point, both poems, actually, no, I wouldn't say both poems for this. Mo Fielding, 7:45, we're moving on. Um, Walking Away explores a parent feelings letting go of their child, whereas Climbing My Grandfather provides the perspective of a child discovering their grandparent, right? So again, we go back to the poem. Now, this is what I've just tried to show you. We always need an introduction, Ben. I'm going to show you that in about 3 minutes' time. Okay, but let's just think for walking away, growing up involves letting go. Well, it's 18 years ago to the day. You drift like a satellite wrenched from its orbit. You're a half-fledged thing set free into the wilderness. Nature's give and take. I've had worse partings, but none that so gnaws at my mind still. Perhaps it's roughly, and then this great final line: how selfhood begins with walking away, and love is proved in letting go. Diana, we're going to finish around 8:30, and then with climbing my grubber, growing up involves discovering. Well, firstly, it's a risk. Good, Sophie. That's a great idea there. The verb wrench suggests the father feels his son is being torn away from him. Good. I like this line about the nails are splintered and give good purchase. Again, emphasizing this idea of risk, of discovery, the glassy ridge of a scar. You know, our parents have lives, our grandparents have lives before us. The wrinkles well spaced and easy. The slow pulse of his good heart. Right? Again, just to come back to these, I always like this line 18 because 18 is symbolic of adulthood. But the process of letting your child go begins long before they hit the age of 18. We've got this good little simile, wrenched from its orbit to show independence. The half-fledged thing, showing that vulnerability. Hello, Leal E. Welcome. Nature's give and take. This kind of description of nature reflects this kind of pain. You know, we get a little bit, we take a little bit. And then this final line, this very poignant and powerful line. Okay? What's the extended metaphor of walking away? I decided to do it free risk. We have throughout this the extended metaphor of mountaineering. Scars reflect a hidden life. The wrinkles well spaced, that sense of age. All of this comes back to discovery. Okay, I'm going to run a quick poll for you people. Which excuse me, which pair of poems should I show an example of? Should I write up? Is that 1, 2, 3, or 4? If you vote now, vote now. So that's number 1 is Winter Swans, When We Two Parted. Number 2, Eden Rock and Follower. Number 3, Love's Philosopher and Sonnet 29. Or number 4, Walking Away and Climbing My Grandfather. Ooh. Oh, it's tight. It's tight. I'll give it another, how many is 153? Right, I'm going to wrap it up in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Okay, number 3, it is. Love's Philosophy and this one. Okay, so bear with me. Right. So here's our bit. Right. So my introduction, guys, look, again, get the poems in early. Show your examiner which 2 poems you're writing about. So in both Love's Philosophy and Sonnet 29, and then your examiner's thinking, boom, okay, thank you. I know which 2 poems you're writing about. And feel free to call Sonnet 29 just Sonnet 29. The poets explore the way that love is powerful, specifically when it is a physical connection where physical intimacy can take place. Okay, that's about all you need, because I would actually say for this comparison question, what you're going to want to do is get straight into it, right? So in both Love's Philosophy and Sonnet 29, the poets explore the way that love is powerful, specifically when it is a physical connection where physical intimacy can take place. Okay, because that's essentially what both of these poems are saying is, like, what's the point in talking? What's the point in thinking? Why can't we just meet and make it real? You know, make it physical. Now, if you wanted to, you could also outline the overall message in here. In Love's Philosophy, the poet shows that without physical intimacy, love is purely platonic. In Sonnet 29, the poet explores the idea that love must have a physical connection, right? Rudo, yes, it's 2 hours, 15 minutes, this exam. So there, I've got my introduction. Now I'm going to launch into my first bit. So, first idea, I've got it written there in my plan, right here. Doo-ba-doo-ba-doo. Both poems use natural imagery to convey the sexual desire of the speakers. Okay? Then I'm going to start with Love's Philosophy. In Love's Philosophy, the poem opens with a striking image of fountains that mingle with the river, right? Immediately, the poet sets the tone of desire by likening his infatuation to the natural image of the fountain, and emphasizing through the verb mingle that he feels he should be as deeply involved with his lover as these natural entities, right? Through the continued use of a semantic field of nature, the poet effectively likens his desire to the normality that exists in the natural world. This effectively, because it's Shelley, right? So this this reflects Shelley's own romantic ideals, namely their belief in the power and intensity of nature. It also implies, I like that from Bella there, a sense of inevitability about their love, specifically the physical aspects. Then, so I've done that, right? Yeah, he was. Shelley, yeah, published 1819, slap bang right there in the middle of the Romantic movement, big time. Percy Shelley obviously was married to Mary Shelley of Frankenstein fame, and Frankenstein, you don't get a more romantic novel than that, really, as in from Romanticism. Yeah, Sonnet 29 is by Browning, right? Similarly, Browning in Sonnet 29 uses the natural world to reflect her intense desire to be physical with a distant lover. Okay? In the opening line, she remarks, "My thoughts do twine and bud," here using the imagery of plants to convey her desire to be wrapped around her lover. Okay? Here, there is a clear sense of female sexual desire emerging, which cleverly subverts Victorian expectations on women who were meant to be, and let's get that classic word in, demure, particularly in matters of attraction, right? Free verse in poetry is just when it's written without any rhythm or rhyme. No rhythm, no rhyme. This is further compounded through the use of wild vines to once again show Browning's desire to be physically intimate with her lover. Let's link it back to the question, once again reflecting the power of love. Okay, so that would be one paragraph. Now, because it's time to move on to unseen, and we want to give enough time, I'll just have to leave that there. But there is an introduction, and there is one paragraph comparison. All you need is two more. And we've got them there. Then you go on, both poems hide the power of love behind euphemism, and then Love's philosophy shows the male perspective, whereas Sonnet 29, the female. Okay, cool. Daniel, it's a great question. There will be next academic year. There will be an A-level English MES course, so look out for that, Daniel. Details to come, but yes, there will be. Last minute free resources, scan here if you need them across all of our subjects. And if you're just joining, I don't know why you would be just joining, because I'm basically just going to say stay in this stream. Me and Louis and I are doing the same thing right now, so there's no need to jump around. I'm going to start in 4 minutes. Okay, 4 minutes. So if you need to get a drink of water, if you need to use the bathroom, we're going to be kicking off at 7:50. Okay, so take 4 minutes now. If you want to ask me any questions, I'm going to eat some cashews. Good evening. I haven't revised any of the poems. Do you recommend I stay for unseen poetry and go revise the poems because I have another exam? I mean, look, buddy, that is your call. I can't make that call for you. You could always watch the unseen bit in the morning. Guys, the timings are very straightforward for this question, for this paper. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes or 135 minutes in total. Okay, so on the modern text, we spend 50 minutes. Okay, on poetry, anthology, we spend 50 minutes. We spend on unseen 25 minutes. And then the unseen comparison, we spend 5 minutes because it's only worth 8 marks. And that leaves 5 mins to check. Okay. If you have 2.5 hours, I would just basically add 5 minutes here. Actually, I'd probably add 10 minutes to your unseen and maybe 5 minutes to one of these. Is it plagiarism if you copy the analysis? Where are you going to copy it from? Sorry, Anne. Good thing I'm on the internet. Mehek, if you've been banned, there's probably a reason, I'm afraid. Yeah, 45, 45, 30, 10 is also fine. I'll be back in 30 seconds to start, peeps. Yo, okay, let's go. Alex Sri Lankan. I do support Man City, yeah. No luck for us. Okay, right, people, let me start off by saying this. Okay, this is an important thing. Public service announcement. Do not leave these marks on the table. Right? Do not leave these marks on the table. And what I mean by that is every single year examiners the students forget, well, they don't forget, they overrun on the other questions and they leave these questions blank. Okay? And that is a problem because look, there are 24 marks available for this. Examiners love marking this question because it gives students a small opportunity to be creative. Yeah, you can be creative with your interpretations of these poems. Okay, and because you can do that, right? Because you can do that, you can not write about anything. I mean, your analysis has to make sense, but you can really get into this. Now, if you follow me on TikTok, which is Alex Does English, you'll see that I've done a few bits on unseen poetry. So do give me a follow over there. And I'm sure you're already subscribed here. So you'll see that I've done some videos on unseen. But in all of these videos, what I basically say is, please make sure that you do this question. Leave yourself enough time. Right. With that, if you've never done unseen poetry, then the best way to approach an unseen poem is to do this first. And what I mean by first is we look at the first and the last line. We look at the imagery. We look at any examples of repetition or rhyme. We look at structure. And then we look at the title. Okay? So the question is, in Women Work, how does the poet present feelings about her life? Feelings about her life. Let's just read through the poem once. Women Work. I've got the children to tend, the clothes to mend, the floor to mop, the food to shop, then the chicken to fry, the baby to dry. I got company to feed, the garden to weed. I've got the shirts to press, the tots to dress, the cane to be cut. I got to clean up this hut, then see about the sick and the cotton to pick. Shine on me, sunshine, rain on me, rain, fall softly, dewdrops, and cool my brow again. Storm, blow from me here, with your fire-crest wind, let me float across the sky till I can rest again. Fall gently, snowflakes, cover me with white, cold icy kisses, let me rest tonight. Sun, rain, curving sky, mountain, oceans, leaf and stone, stars shine, moon glow, you're all that I can call my own. And this is by Maya Angelou. Right. So I'm just gonna time some people out who are just we haven't got time for this irrelevant football conversation. So who can tell me what is the speaker's feelings about her life? Let's not worry too much about the kind of methods just yet. What is the feelings? How can we summarize the feelings about her life? So the speaker feels that life is monotonous, okay, and wishes she could rest. That's about as simple as you need to keep your perspective, on what the poem is saying. Amber, I did this exact poem in my English lesson earlier. Nice one. Yeah, her life is mediocre, repetitive, mundane. Okay. Tired by the amount of responsibilities. I'll add some of these words too. We've got a sense of responsibility. We've got a sense of tiredness. We've got a sense of responsibility. We've got a sense of responsibility. We've got a sense of tiredness. We've got a sense of tiredness. We've got a sense of responsibility. We've got a sense of tiredness. We've got a sense of tiredness. We've got a sense of tiredness. There's a sense of it being never ending, right? Okay, what does monotonous mean? It means basically basically means repetitive. Okay, if something's repetitive, it's monotonous over and over again. Good, we got the urban to the natural, really nice. So then we can start to launch in first and last. Well, what can we say about the first line? Well, the first line, I've got children to tend. This is obviously kind of stereotypical representation of female work. Children to tend. There's a sense of care there. We move into the imagery. Well, look, we've got lots of things that need fixing, don't we? Lots of things that need fixing. Clothes to mend, floor to mop, food to shop, then chicken to fry. So all of these things here reflect her responsibilities. We've got the language itself. There's so many good ideas. Guys, this is what I mean. This is your opportunity to pick up marks. You're picking up marks left, right, and center on this. Just all of this stuff. If everybody said the things that we're saying in here, you'd be pushing 19, 20, 21 marks. Yeah, we've got in medias res, beginning. Absolutely. We've got, what's the word? Like short, staccato sentences, lines. Again, to show that boredom. Simple rhyme scheme. Right? The rhythm shows fast pace and nature of motherhood. Absolutely. The kind of the fast paced nature of motherhood. We've got caesura, sorry, not caesura, anaphora. God, my head's going now. AABB and then ABAB, tend, mend, mop, shop, fry, feed, weed, press, dress, cut, hut, sick, pick, sunshine, rain, dewdrops again. Yep, okay, then we move, absolutely. Ah, there's too much. Imagery. The garden to weed. All of these responsibilities, okay? So if we're just thinking about the structure, all of these things here are our responsibilities, right? Then the poem, it starts to around here. Rain on me, rain. Shine on me, sunshine. Rain on me, rain. Dewdrops. When it changes. Farah, this is such a good unseen poem. Yeah. I'm sorry if you don't get anything quite as good as this tomorrow. So there's a volta here. And then the poem opens up as she fantasizes about rest. So we got shine on me, rain on me, fall softly, dewdrops, cool my brown, storm blow for me from here with your fiercest wind, this sense of wanting to be saved, this idea of rest. Anaphora is when the opening word or collection of words are repeated. So the clothes, the mop floor, the food, the baby. Asindeton reflects her ongoing life and her wishes to rest. The elongated use of her list tasks shows her desperation, longing to break and let her rest. Will there always likely be a second layer of meaning? Not necessarily. The poems they give you tend to be about quite boring things. The change from mundane task to natural imagery shows that how she dreams of being liberated from her traditional role. Dreams of liberation. Now, look, guys, can I just say, be strict with your time on modern texts and anthology poetry. Get to this question and do what everybody is doing in here. Read the poem, come up with a couple of ideas, pick out the first and the last. Well, this is an interesting end. You're all that I can call my own. What is the you're? Fall gently, slowly, cover me with white, cold, icy kisses, let me rest tonight. Sun, rain, curving sky, mountain, oceans, leaf as though starshine, moon glowing. You're all that I can call my own. Who is the you? Hastur, yes, absolutely. She is part of the poem herself, yeah, but the you're all that I can call my own. Yeah, she's talking about nature because nature provides her with peace and comfort, whereas all of these other things are they're others, right? James, if you said her husband, fine. If you said her children, fine. That's definitely I'm open to that interpretation. Um, this is not supposed to be in here. Sorry, it's supposed to be in italic. Anne Marie, I can see what you're doing there. That's very good idea, but that line's not supposed to be here. Okay, so how would we then write about this? Right? How would we write about this? Well, we just need at the start a nice opening sentence, right, where we show our examiner that we've understood the poem. So, in Woman Work, Maya Angelou presents the speaker, not present, I don't like that. The speaker conveys their feelings of boredom and monotony at the mundane and repetitive nature of their life. However, towards the end of the poem, we see that the speaker finds safety and comfort in her perception of the natural world. Okay? That's about how long. Now, just a few tips with this question. You don't need to bring in context. You probably wouldn't get a poem by Maya Angelou, but if you did, there's no need to launch into something about how she was this incredible star of the civil rights movement, or how she knew, or how she wrote I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. The examiners just want you to analyze what's on the page. Okay, just analyze what's on the page, right? So then we need to kind of break this into three things, don't we? So the poem explores the boredom that comes with being a mother, right? That would be our first point, right? You do need an intro, Hannes. You don't need a conclusion. My second would be the poem explores, looks at the way that people find an escape in their imagination. Is it a palindrome? I don't think so. I don't think so. Maybe also lastly, the poet emphasizes the contrast that comes between parental life and maybe an elegy to our old life. Nico, that's a good idea, actually. Between a person's life before children and after it. Okay, so that would be like three interesting avenues to go down with this. So with my first paragraph, the poem explores the boredom that comes with being a mother. I'm just going to take some evidence from this opening. I'm going to start with the title, I've always tried to encourage students to begin their first bit of analysis on the title. The poem is entitled Woman Work, which serves a double meaning. Firstly, the implication is that women must work, and often this work can be quite stifling. Thank you to Nico for answering Farah's question. However, it also reflects the opening of the poem and the list of the type of work that a woman might do. Okay, so do you see what I've done there? As in, I've used the title firstly to give a couple of interpretations, like 2 interpretations, but then secondly, I've used it to set me up to start talking about the opening of the poem. In the first line of the poem, the speaker states, I've got the children to tend. Right? Here, the use of children creates the suggestion that she is responsible for the raising of for the kids. Can you also say how women used to not be able to work, so that it shows freedom she has now? Yeah, possibly. But remember, let's just try and focus on what's on the page. I'm going to go for creates the suggestion of motherhood. And the fact that she must tend to them places her in a position of responsibility, right? The poet then uses anaphora to create a monotonous and repetitive tone to reflect the repetitive work that she must do. For example, the clothes to mend, the floor to mop. The anaphora continues, listing day-to-day tasks and mundane work. Nico, it does, but is that the most important thing? Right? Is that the most important thing? So the anaphora continues listing day-to-day tasks and mundane work, creating a sense of sympathy in the reader as we can see the restrictive and stifling nature of her life, right? The short staccato lines create a dull and overbearing tone to the opening of the poem, which continues up until the volta, where the lines begin to open up. So I saw someone call you a hamster here. I feel that is offensive to you. No, it would be offensive to hamsters, not to me. So the poem looks at that way, and then we'd move on, right? The poem looks at the way that people can find an escape in their imagination, right? Then I'm going to move. Now, this is like an interesting poem because it lends itself nicely to writing about it chronologically, doesn't it? I just thought that every art part of our life is constricted, particularly line at the vault to conveys that her prejudice is her greatest burden. Yeah? I mean, really what we're looking at here is a very monotonous existence, isn't it, really? But then I would move. The poem looks at the way that people find an escape in their imagination, particularly from such a monotonous existence as is conveyed in this poem. So the Volta begins when the speaker states, "Shine on me, sunshine." The slightly longer line now creating a sense of breath. Monotonous means repetitive, freedom, and in particular, the use of sibilants. Could you link the negative connotations of slavery in the first half, which juxtaposes the escape of an imagination? You know what? Like the reason I chose this poem was because it's a good example of one where you do not need to bring your prior knowledge of Maya Angelou to it. It's not going to get you any marks. Remember, the mark scheme for this question is just AO1 and AO2. That's why it's worth 24 marks, because it's 12 each. Right? So in particular, that use of sibilants um, appears to convey her growing sense of freedom and joy as she imagines the natural world. And then you might want to bring that tentative language in there. It could be that the writer is using nature as a metaphor for freedom, as it is so large and um, incredible, providing a nice juxtaposition to the restrictive world of domestic life, right? Yeah, definitely use context for love and relationships. Definitely. Okay. Could you say how first punctuation is only after pick? Then Angelou goes on to talk about nature, shows you nature seeking for help. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, what I'm trying to say is with this is like, okay, we know that this is by Maya Angelou, but really what your examiner wants you to do is to just talk about what is written on the page. You don't need to bring in your knowledge of her and her life into this. Um, so look, if your main takeaway from this question, from question um, is just have fun with it and leave yourself enough time. In terms of structure, you're aiming to write a very short introduction, and then you're aiming for 3 paragraphs. Shouldn't we aim to find a deeper meaning? Yeah, if you can, but you're going to pick up as many marks just by keeping it on the surface. If something strikes you and it's really interesting, great. 100% right about it. I've always told students with this question, take a risk. Take a risk with it. Have fun with it. If you read something and something pops into your mind, you're like, oh, that's a sick idea. Put it down. Write it down. Get it there, back it up with some evidence and explain yourself. Right? But my point is that the mark scheme is so forgiving for this question. Um, that you want to provide yourself with an opportunity to just take a little risk, have a little bit of fun. If you can find a deeper meaning, great. If you can't, answer the question. Great question, Mintu. Will you ever be asked to compare two unseen poetry questions? Well, this is where we come into the last little bit of this lesson today. We've got about 15 minutes or so lesson. I'll stay online for a few minutes after to take some questions. But you would then move into this. Now, this is worth 8 marks. So you don't want to spend more than 10 minutes on it. Really, ideally, about 5. Do the connotations need to be perfect? No, Diana. You just need to show your examiner. Look, your examiner knows you've been in the exam for almost 2 hours by this point. You read a poem you've never seen before, and you're expected to write about 2 pages on it. They're going to be forgiving. They're going to be forgiving. Okay? Now, when we get to this final question, bear in mind, we've already read this poem. We already know what it is. In both Women Work and Overheard in County Sligo, the speakers describe feelings about their lives. What are the similarities and or differences? Please, firstly, you can just write about similarities or differences. Okay? Some people say that the 8 marker ain't worth it. Buddy, Ritual, I think I've said this to you before. I'll say it to everybody right now. 8 marks is the difference between a 7 and an 8 and a 9, a 5 and a 6. Okay, if you leave these marks on the table, you're instantly -8. Yeah, so everybody else, their paper is starting from 0. You're starting from -8 if you don't do this question. Okay, the same way is with if you don't answer the unseen poetry and then you don't answer this, you're starting from -32. Basically, kind of. So yeah, so think about that. Okay. Maybe that maths doesn't quite work out, but you get my point. Let's answer every question on the paper if you want to get a 7 at least. So we know what the message is about her feelings about her life. She feels like her life is mundane. Yeah, her life is mundane, but there is hope in nature. What about this poem? I married a man from County Roscommon, and I live in the back of beyond, with a field of cows and a yard of hens and 6 white geese on the pond. At my door's a square of yellow corn, caught up by its corners and shaken, and the road runs down through the open gate, and the freedom's there for the taking. I had thought to work on the Abbey stage or have my name in a book, to see my thought on the printed page or still the crowd with a look. But I turned to fold the breakfast cloth and to polish the lustre brass, to order and dust the tumbled rooms and find my face in the glass. I ought to feel I'm a happy woman, for I lie in the lap of the land, but I married the man from County Roscommon and I live in the back of beyond. Okay, so what can we say just very quickly about the feelings of the speaker in this poem? Ultimately, what? She wishes her life were different because it is so mundane. Mundane. There we go. It's the same poem, basically. Then we've got our answers, right? Both poems contain speakers who feel trapped in the mundanity of their lives. Godiva, that's wicked. I love that. We can talk about that. The cyclical structure shows she feels trapped. Okay. This section here. Yo, Jamie Ratcliffe. Shows her wishes in the same way that this one shows her wishes. And alternately, both of them are restricted by something. Here, it's children. and here it's marriage. Cyclical structure shows that she cannot escape a mundane and monotonous life. Absolutely. Poet 2 is willing to achieve freedom independently. However, Poet 1 wants to achieve freedom by the natural world. I don't think, no. I mean, the poet, the second poet, is just restricted, aren't they, entirely? You're not going to fail. You're going to smash it tomorrow. Come on. You can do this. One more English Lit exam to go and you will be killing it. Okay? Just stick to the timings and get your ideas down on the paper. I guarantee you, you will do well. Okay? Now, how do you answer this question? Guys, it's super simple. Okay? Firstly, you just provide your examiner with a nice comparative statement, right? I've got one already. It's right here, right? Both poems, and you can get some words down there. You have to analyze the first poem as well, right, Farah? Yes, you do. So in both Woman Work and Overheard in County Sligo, the speakers feel trapped by their domestic life and wish their lives could have been different. Can we use some of the sentences you used earlier? Yes, absolutely. 100%. Okay. Now, what we're looking to do, it's 8 marks. So really, we want to try, if we can, to combine everything in one big chunky paragraph. Okay. So we just start off by saying, you look back at in Women Work. In Women Work, the writer uses anaphora to show the repetitive and boring nature of life raising children, right? Yeah, me and Louis are doing the same thing. So, the clothes to mend, the floor to mop. The clothes to mend, the floor to mop show these images of domestic. So why are you guys doing it again? Just because we're both going for 3 hours, it's just easier to keep people onto our stream. Could you do one paragraph of similarities and one of differences? You could, yep. I've always taught it just to do everything in one big section, right? So the lines the close to Metless floor to mop show these images of domestic life and the way they can cause women to feel bored and overwhelmed by the responsibility. Okay. Similarly, in Overheard in County Sligo, sorry, bear with me, just need my poem. There we go. The speaker discusses the way she folds the breakfast cloth and polishes the brass. Elizabeth L. If you don't get time to do the 8 marker, will you get some marks for writing in bullet points? Yes. Not as many, but yes. So then what I would do here, so I've got my quote now. So similarly, in Overheard in County Sligo, the speaker discusses the way she folds the breakfast cloth and polishes the brass. These are nearly identical images of domestic tasks and reflect the wider expectation on women to be the heads of the house. Both poems are showing speakers who feel trapped and attempt to elicit the sympathies of the readers by emphasizing just how monotonous this life can be. Okay, this is especially compounded by the structure of Overheard, as the poem ends in the way that it began, with the lines, yeah, that is deeper meaning there, isn't it? I married the man from County Roscommon, right? Here creating a cyclical cycle that seems to imply that this type of life is never ending. I've been told not to use shows or showing at all. Will I realistically mark down? As in this shows. Why would they mark you down for that? How else would you say it? How else would you say? I mean, you can go obviously cycling through shows, suggests, implies, conveys, but using these words in of themselves won't pick you up marks. How many marks would you need to get on this whole lit paper 2 section for a grade 5? Well, a grade 5 is around 50% of the total marks, so you're looking for 80 out of 160. But really, to be on the safe side, you'd probably want to be more like 85. Maybe because everyone says this shows, yeah, but everyone says hello, good morning, how are you doing? Just because everyone says something doesn't mean it's inherently wrong. And again, I could write, like this shows, and then it's this that comes after that's going to get you grade 9 or grade 8 or 7. Okay. Okay, I'm going to pause it here. I'm going to take questions for the last, I'm going to stay on here for about 5 minutes or so. Just with this question, again, look, it's worth 8 marks. You just pick out the similarity or a difference and you explain it. Okay, look how I've done it here. I mean, this with a little bit more would be 8 marks because I just need to come back to the structural feature of the of women work. In women work, the writer ends, sorry, not the writer, the poet ends the poem by pivoting to images of the natural world to juxtapose the boredom they experience in their day-to-day life. Right? That's going to be enough for 8 marks. It's only 8 marks. It doesn't have to be tremendously long. Does the mark scheme say you have to do both similarity or does it matter? Nope. One, both, either or and or. It says it here. It doesn't just say it in the mark scheme. It says it here. And or. Right? It's not like, they've done similarities. Another way of thinking about this question is same idea, different method, or different idea, same method. Yeah, that's another way to structure. Yeah, Megan, so overall tips for the exam are as follows. Ibrahim, thank you. Obviously, always appreciate a good Trustpilot review if you can. If you forget a quote, use a reference. And what that means is just describe the part. Okay? I don't know what the mark is for a grade 9 because I don't know the grade boundaries, but it's always around 90% for a 9. Overall tips, stick to timings. So again, if the exam starts at 9, then at 9:50, that's going to be your modern text. From 9:50 to 10:40 is going to be poetry. 10:40 to 11:05 is unseen. 11:05 to 11:10 is the 8 marker. And then 11:10 to 11:15 is check. In a bit, Rich, I'll get a good night's rest, guys. If you're leaving, drink lots of water. Take a bottle of water into that exam. Don't drink too much because you'll need to go to the loo, but drink enough to stay hydrated. Guys, just aim for full marks. Exactly. I mean, look, again, for a 9, I would be expecting that you're getting sort of, 29 out of 34 on this, 26 out of 30 on this, 20 out of 24 on this, 8 out of 8 on this. Last question is just marked on AO2, right? So are you getting no marks for your points? What's the point of the points? Great question, Michael. I mean, you need the points to set up your analysis of the methods, don't you? But yeah, it's a good point. I've always wondered that too. I don't have an answer to that question. It is a bit silly. Guys, look, thank you so much. As I said, please do hit subscribe if you haven't already. It'd be great to have people in the lead up for the language and stuff. I know you're going to smash it tomorrow because this has been incredible. There's been incredible ideas from start to finish. Blood Brothers, Loves and Relationships, poetry. You will smash it. Have so much fun. Have so much fun. I'm going to stay on for a little bit. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if there's anything that I haven't covered. Obviously, please do leave a review on Trustpilot. Always appreciated. I will put the link in now for the Trustpilot. Thank you so much, obviously, for all of your hard work today. This will be my last cram course actually, because yeah, this will be my last cram course. What's going on here? Absolute boop. There we go. What do you need for a grade 4? 40%, Jacob, roughly. Thank you, Hastua. Thank you, Christinian. Would you get the same mark as someone who said quite a few just made a references? I think you could do. You could do. Especially if your ideas are really good. Farah, no, I'm not, because I'm teaching my other year groups at that time. But Louis will be doing all of the language courses on Thursday and then after half term. Would you get the same mark? Any other questions that I've missed there? On the Amos. Not sure what that means on the Amos. How do you know if your point is high level when you're writing it? Daniel, I'm not sure that anyone can truly know that. Yeah, I'm not sure anyone can truly know that. You just got to trust it, But I'm sure it will be. Bruh. All right, people. Let me know how it goes. Please do give me a follow over on TikTok. Alex does English. I'm going to be posting about the exam tomorrow, so let me know how it goes in the comments. Let me know in the comments tomorrow, once you're out of that exam, how many alternative interpretation study you use. At least two. At least two in the exam. Two. Happy to stay on a little bit longer, people. Let me know if you have any other questions, anything else you want to know. Thank you, Julian. Thank you so much. Cool. If there's no more questions, then I will let you head off and get rested. It's been a pleasure, people. Thank you so much. See you later.